welcome. I am Heather Oh, let me start that. I'll just block that again. I am Heather Woodman because I just got married in November and sometimes it slips out that I've changed my name. So I am so happy to have you today. My guest today is Kristen Ulmer, and she is so remarkable and has such a remarkable story, and I am just so excited to have her. There we go. When she responded to me, she has a book that's called The Art of Fear. And I've had a very interesting relationship with fear my whole life. And I've tried to block it, I've tried to hide it, and her whole idea is to embrace fear. And not only that, but she is a extreme sports skier. And anyway, Kristen, just introduce yourself a little bit.
Okay, I'm a fear and anxiety expert. I wrote a book called The Art of Fear that really took off in the last few years. I'm writing a book about anxiety right now. How I became a fear and anxiety expert basically is three areas of experience. I started out as a professional athlete in a very dangerous sport. I was considered the best woman big mountain extreme skier in the world for 12 years. I was also considered the most fearless woman athlete in North America by the outdoor industry. So there was a belief about me being fearless. I felt fearless, and I wasn't, as it turns out. The second way in which I kind of put all the pieces of the puzzle together about what to do about fear is I then studied a Zen approach, an Eastern approach to emotional intelligence for 15 years after I retired as an athlete, and then realized very quickly exactly what I did right by fear and what I did wrong by fear during my ski career. And then I've now worked with over 10,000 clients, helping them navigate their relationship with fear and anxiety. And here I sit today. I don't have a PhD. This is not how I learned about fear. I didn't learn about it in college. I learned about it through real world experience. I'm super excited to be here and talk to you about all things fear and anxiety related.
Well, I am so excited. And I feel like this couldn't be a better time for us to be talking about this, because there is so much fear and anxiety going on in the world right now. So I just think this is, completely apropos. It's just exactly what needs to be happening. So in some of your interviews and in your book, which I am right in the middle of and I'm loving it, you talk about your relationship with fear and realizing you had a relationship with fear at a very young age. Can you dive into that? When did you have that relationship and realize it?
Well, I mentioned that I did some things right by fear and I did some things wrong by fear. I'm going to first outline the things that I did wrong by fear.
Okay.
I was raised just a free-range child, and I pretty much had to take care of myself. And how I dealt with that as a young child, I started to ignore my fear. And ignoring it causes problems. It's like ignoring the nature of the human experience itself. There's another thing that was going on, though, that actually really helped me, which is I enjoyed feeling fear. Like, I like doing scary things. And that's what I did that actually helped me be so great at my sport. So everybody is different. Some people ignore their fear. Some people avoid fear. They avoid anything scary. Some people, the language, try to conquer or overcome their fear. They declare war against it. They take out a big sword, usually their intellect being the sword, and try to rationalize away the fear. We actually see this with cognitive behavioral therapy, just actually assistance to help people do this. The list goes on and on. Basically, 7.5 billion different people, 7.5 billion different unique relationships with fear out there. And for the most part, we're all taught to resist feeling fear or see it as an enemy on some level. Like fear is a bad, bad, bad thing. And so that has led to us not treating fear properly,
Yeah.
and resulting in a whole host of emotional issues. Instead of whatever you resist persists, next thing you know, we have rampant anxiety disorders. If you repress fear, it becomes pressed down and you become depressed. It's the cause of depression. It's the cause of PTSD, our mistreatment of fear.
Yes.
Insomnia, that undealt with fear, wakes you up in the middle of the night when your guard is dropped and runs its agenda in your thoughts. And on and on and on. Like if you have irrational fear, if you have panic attacks, this is all because you have a compromised relationship with fear. So all these things that we've been taught to do regarding fear, in my case, ignoring it, leads to a lot of problems. And that's what I'm here to help address and resolve. Conversely, though, if you have a healthy, flowing relationship with fear, all these problems resolve and you go on to be really great at something, like I did.
Yeah. So like my mind is spinning. So I have like, I can just list all of these fears that I have, and there's a thought process out there that if you focus on that fear, then then you attract what you fear most. What are your thoughts about that?
Let me talk about what you just outlined, which is focused on fear, which suggests your mind, like when you focus on a ball, right? You're looking at it and you're thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
So backing up, fear comes from the amygdala, which is two almond-shaped nuggets at the top of your spine. It's the oldest part of your brain. But your amygdala doesn't have thoughts. It's just kind of more of an intuitive reactionary process. Lizards have amygdalas, cats have amygdalas, but they don't think fearful thoughts. It's just like, oh, there's a perceived threat, sends a shot of fear into our bodies. And fear, proven by science, is first felt in our bodies. It's a physical reaction. It's an emotion that's felt in our bodies. Right now, emotional intelligence is seen as our ability to understand our emotions, and I'm pointing to my brain, and control them. So next thing you know, like if a lizard feels fear, there's no thought. It just leads to immediate fight or flight action. But we're now thinking about our fear instead of just feeling it in our bodies, or we're focusing on it. Next thing you know, instead of fighting or fleeing the situation, we're fighting or fleeing the fear. We're declaring war against our fear. We're running away from fear, all of that. So this is a long way of saying that if you're focusing on your fear, that means you're in your head about it. If you're in flow with your fear, you're in your body, and it never actually gets to your thoughts or to your head. So if you have fears, which is different from fear, fear is a feeling and sensation of discomfort in your body. Fears are thoughts about it. Like fears are the emotion of fear plus a thought. Then you've basically gotten out of the flow of it in your body, and you're now living in your head about it, and that's what has gone wrong.
Yeah, I can totally see that. So do you have tools or suggestions or how to go with that flow? Because that's the ideal, right? To go with that flow of fear.
Yes, so you want to understand it a little bit more. We are now dealing with our emotions intellectually.
Mm-hmm.
And this is taught. We're actually, like I said before, taught that emotional intelligence is our ability to understand our emotions and control them. And so we're in our heads, like our brains are great. We're really smart. Like we think, okay, we can figure anything out. So we put our minds, our thoughts, our intellect on the job of dealing with our emotions. What we do is we're now trying to understand something that can never be understood. It's like trying to understand the universe. And it's like this giant puzzle, and you have no idea what the picture looks like. And you may be able to understand a few things, but in moments, it just changes anyway. And so, you're going to get lost in that process. You're going to make your therapist super rich, right? You're never going to be able to understand your emotions.
Absolutely.
And, right? It's like trying to understand the universe. And we can understand a few things, but just because we know scientifically that when you feel fear, you know, you have cortisol and norepinephrine and all of that and the like adrenaline, it
Right.
doesn't make you feel less fear when you give a speech, right? It's essentially useless information.
Yeah.
So what I recommend is that we completely redefine what emotional intelligence is. It's not our ability to understand our emotions, and it's not our ability to control our emotions, because whatever you try to control winds up controlling you.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, for me, this is how I've redefined emotional intelligence. It's our ability to feel our emotions in an honest way and have them help us come alive. And when you do this, because the emotion proven by science first starts, so there's something good that science offers us. It does show up in our bodies first. If you can learn how to stay in your body and feel that emotion in your body, then it helps you come alive. And let me give you a quick example of this. I mentioned that I was the best in the world at an incredibly scary sport. I mean, I was making life or death decisions on a daily basis. Extreme sports are like that. So because, and I mentioned also that I did some things right by fear. This is what I did right. Because I enjoyed feeling fear, first of all, it didn't feel like fear. I had actually an intimacy with fear. And when you have that kind of relationship with fear, all that you feel is alive, excited. Neurochemically, fear and excitement are exactly the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Super focused in the present moment. It takes you into a flow state. And because I'm willing to feel it and the fear's in my body, you know, if I'm standing at the top of an Alaskan mountain and I'm about to ski a Eupholiadae descent and jump off a 50-foot cliff halfway down, you know, you want to be in your body when you do this. You don't want to be in your head. And because I was more willing to feel fear than most people, I would be in my body and I would be all about reaction. Because I was tapped into my fear, I was tapped into my intuition and instinct. I could have lightning fast reflexes. We see this in animals. You
Mm-hmm.
know, they don't think about fear. They're just in their bodies with it. And they become amazing athletes when they need to be. Their hearing is better. Their eyesight's better when there's fear around. So that's what I experienced. And this is something that we can all learn how to have or experience in our own lives if we get out of our heads and into our bodies and learn how to feel fear in an honest way. It will only help us come alive.
So, like, I can see how that's totally beneficial in an extreme sport. And even with me, so my background is music theater and getting on stage and singing, um, but one of my, okay, total vulnerability here. One of my greatest fears is singing to somebody I'm auditioning for. So to sing to 1 to 5 people is so much scarier for me than singing to 5,000, right? I'm like, and so, um, how would you, is it the same thing? Like just go with that flow and in that kind of moment?
Let me ask you a quick question.
Yeah.
And this actually happened. There was a woman pianist who was about to perform to a sold out audience. She was very famous. And the woman's assistant received a phone call 10 minutes before she was going to go on stage and found out the woman's mother had just died unexpectedly. So she hung up the phone and she had a decision to make. And what decision would you make if you were that assistant? Would you tell the pianist before she goes out to perform that her mother just died, or would you wait until after the performance?
I probably would tell her before, um,
Why is that?
because of that truth. And for me, I actually perform better when something has just happened. Uh, it yeah, it gets me into my body, and just that realization of what matters and where I am. And yeah, it just kind of takes me out of myself, actually, if that makes sense.
It does. And in this story, and this is a true story, the assistant, of course, this woman is a very famous pianist. The assistant, of course, knew to tell her before. And the woman went out and performed 10 minutes later, of course, having grief and sadness. And how well do you think she performed? She performed brilliantly.
Yeah.
And in fact, it was the best performance of her life at that time. And the audience didn't know that the woman's mother had just died. All they knew is that they were absolutely moved beyond belief, to tears. Like there wasn't a dry eye in the audience. And so we get that the emotions are really important in the artistic world.
Absolutely.
And the emotions include sadness, anger. You know, I have a whole bunch of art that I bought that depict anger. It's just gorgeous. Like I look at hippie art, like joy, love,
Mhm.
gratitude art, and I'm like, snooze fest, right? Like it's this the really strong, unpleasant emotions that really wake us up and make us feel so alive. Fear is the same. So you say that, oh yes, I get that in extreme sports, but it's the same thing for everyone. Like us athletes that do these super dangerous sports that are super scary, like these emotions are our fuel in our gas tank. Like out there on the mountain, I'm like Batman and fear is Robin. And I could punch Robin in the face. I could punch fear in the face, like we're taught, like not let it get the better of me, conquer and overcome it. And it gives me a moment of like relief, right? But I've just rendered myself very, very weak because you kind of want to have fear with you to make you more sharp and focused. And it's the same for you if you're going out to perform. It's like the fear is actually there to help you be more present and perform better. And as for you, you know, performing better in front of a large audience, I'm not sure what's going on. I suspect though that maybe you have a way of blocking out fear in a large audience, but you can't do it with a smaller audience.
Yeah, that's probably.
Um, but the thing is, you don't ever want to block out your fear because it may make you get through a moment of having to perform way out of your comfort zone. Like here's your comfort zone, big audience. You're like way out here. You're not just a little out of your comfort zone. But there's consequences for doing that. Like for example, right after my book came out, I'm a facilitator. I give speeches now, but I didn't back then. I was, you know, mostly just about facilitation and helping people explore their own relationship with fear. Next thing you know, I'm giving this huge talk to a very important audience that could really make or break my career. It's a 75-minute speech. I'm way out of my comfort zone. And it's 10 minutes before I'm about to go on, and I'm like having a panic attack. And mind you, I'm about to go on stage to tell people how to handle their fear and anxiety, right?
Right.
So fortunately, I knew what to do, right? And I went and found a quiet space. And I think that most people would think, oh, in that moment, what you do is you breathe in, calm, breathe out your fear, rationalize, I've got this, I'm totally ready. Like,
A lot of people do
you know,
that.
there's nothing to be afraid of. Like,
Yeah.
don't do it, right? It will get you through a moment, but you've just denied fear its rightful place in your life. You are actually in your head about it, fighting a war with it intellectually. And if you could get, I could go have done this and gone out on the stage and I would have felt better. But the next time I gave a speech, it would be even stronger. The fear would be even louder. And then the next speech, even louder until eventually I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I got to quit. I can't, you know,
Yeah.
it's just, it's not the right thing to do, even though it's rampantly taught by pretty much everyone out there except for me. So pay attention. This is what I did instead.
Yes.
This is,
Oh,
I just realized my phone is on. I'm going to turn it off real quick. So this is absolutely the cutting edge approach to fear that is going to change everything for everyone, because the other only leads to anxiety disorders, panic attacks, irrational fear, insomnia, PTSD, depression, all those things that I outlined, because whatever you resist persists. Like that undealt with fear will just start screaming louder and louder, and it'll either show up in your life as an exaggerated version of itself, or it'll show up redirected in other ways, you know, like anger or excessive sadness, or it'll hijack your mind and show up in your thoughts. Like you do not want to keep going down that road. And how do I know it causes these things? Well, these issues, despite all our attempts to conquer and overcome them, are only getting worse and worse. And if we keep it up, you know, what's the definition of insanity? doing the same thing over and over again,
Over again.
expecting different
Yeah,
results.
what was that? Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
All this stuff that we do, these breathing exercises, this calmness practice, the meditation apps, rationalizing it away, are only making these problems worse. If we keep it up, pretty soon we're all going to be medicated. So do this instead. You ready?
What did you do?
This is what I did.
I'm so ready. Okay.
Woo, the big build up, right? So this is how you deal with your emotions emotionally. This is how you deal with them in an honest way. I went behind a building, found a quiet space. This took me 2 minutes. So the first thing I did is I recognized that it's normal and natural for me to feel fear. And this goes for like coronavirus times. You are supposed to be feeling this. It's not a sign of personal weakness. It's not a character flaw. There is something to be afraid of. This is a very scary ride called life. Right now with the coronavirus, even more scary. Imagine if you then also had to give a speech during coronavirus times, right? A lot of fear, normal and natural.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Second thing, this is a 4-step process. And actually, this is something I recommend that everybody do right now, because this will get you out of your head and more into your body and give you a flowing experience with fear so that it doesn't turn into an anxiety disorder. So second step, I closed my eyes and I did a body scan. Hopefully you all have a healthy relationship with your body that you can do this. If you can't, reach out to me. I will teach you how to do this. So I closed my eyes and I did a body scan and I noticed where I was feeling the sensation of discomfort in my body. And at that time I was feeling anxiety and nervousness, and it was in my chest and in my throat. So then I put my hands on that part of me. I'm not going to do it because I have a microphone, but I put my hand on that part of me and I touched it. And I noticed that it was a level 10 out of 10. And I want to introduce an equation. Suffering equals discomfort times resistance. So my discomfort was a level 10. It's very hard to change that number. It's normal and natural to feel it. Third step, I noticed, what is my relationship with that feeling? Damn it, I was resisting it, also to a level 10, which sucked because I wrote a whole book about how not to resist fear. And there I was doing it. So 10 times 10, that's a whole lot of suffering. So I noticed that I was in a place of like, I don't want to feel this. I'm not in the mood for fear right now. I wish it would go away. I don't want to give this speech. So what I did in step 3 is I first spent some quality time with my resistance. You don't want to try to try to conquer and overcome your fear, but you also don't want to try to conquer and overcome your resistance. Like, the resistance is also normal and natural. Fear is an uncomfortable feeling. If you touch a hot stove, you're going to resist that. You resist negative people. Like, resistance is a healthy response, but unfortunately, it's also rampantly taught in our society. In all these attempts to conquer and overcome fear, we're now just totally in resistance. We see it as a bad thing. We try to get rid of it. So I then spent a minute just fully embracing my resistance. And what that looked like is I just said over and over again while touching the spot, I don't want to feel this. I wish I weren't here. I wish I was just at home on the couch watching a movie with my husband. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here.
Mm-hmm.
And I just said this over and over again because it was like an upset child that just really needed to express itself. And after about a minute, it ran out of things to say and went from a level 10 to a level 1. So 10 times 1, that's a lot less suffering. And then the fourth step, which is the step that I really hope people do right now during the coronavirus times, is still with your hand on the spot where you're feeling your fear. You now just spend some quality time feeling it, not focusing on it with your mind. That's different. Like if you're kissing somebody, or if you're giving a hug to somebody, you're not thinking about it. You're not focusing on the hug. You're just feeling the experience, right? It's very different. So not focusing on a ball, but feeling the ball, very different experience. So you just spend some time feeling it, which is what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And I gave it some love. I gave it a hug. It's like an upset child that's just trying to get your attention. And after 1 minute, it calmed down from a level 10 to a level 1. It ran out of things to say, it dissipated. So this took me 2 minutes, and I got my suffering from a level 100 down to a level 1. And I did this without repression. And it was a beautiful moment that I had with my fear. And then I went on stage and I did great. And yes, I fumbled a couple words, but the fear was there to keep me sharp, like, oh, recenter yourself, speak more slowly, speak more clearly. Like, the fear is there to make you magnificent. And it works that way with anything.
The fear is there to make you magnificent. Yeah, that's powerful.
So not only does a practice like this, where you learn how to be in flow with your body, end anxiety problems, depression, PTSD, insomnia, and on and on and on. Like, fear's here. It's like screaming at us all, like, pay attention to me. Like, I know that we don't trust it at this point because it seems so irrational and crazy, but the way that we've been treating fear, both as individuals and as a society, has left fear no recourse but to scream at us back and act all kinds of crazy.
Yeah.
And so the only impression that we have of fear right now is this crazy force in our lives that we've actually turned crazy. Imagine if you were ignored and fought with your entire life. Everybody hates you. You've been locked in the basement. Everybody's ignoring you. They're blaming you for all your problems. You'd be acting pretty crazy too. And that's what fear is doing. It's just in retaliation for how we've been treating it. If we start treating it with respect and consideration, it calms right down, and so do we. And then it turns into that resource that I mentioned that help us be more alive. If you tap into your fear, you tap into your intuition. And if you tap into any emotion, sadness, joy, anger, sexuality, fear also, you tap into your creativity. And I think that's what this podcast is about. So we can talk about that next if you want.
Yes. So how do you, so many thoughts and questions, but how does that help you tap into your creativity? As some people look at a blank page if they're writers or if they're an artist, or a blank stage, and so many possibilities are there, and yet a lot of artists get into the mentality of, but I'm my voice may not be important, or my voice is different than this person's voice, and so it's not necessary to be heard, or you know what I mean? Whatever that may be, there becomes a comparison, and therefore I'm not good enough, or I don't have something new to say. I don't, that kind of thing, which can be scary and a creative block.
Going back to my ski career, I had an incredible fear of not being special, of being invisible, and not being lovable. So anybody that is successful, that does incredible things with their lives, their motivation comes from some sort of insecurity or pathology from their childhood. No exceptions.
Right.
I mean, to have the kind of motivation that I had to risk my life on a daily basis, there had to be some sort of pathology behind that. To have somebody work, 120-hour work weeks, there's a pathology behind that. Trust me. And it always has something to do with fear and maybe anger. So you are going to be feeling a lot of fear. And the difference between whether your fear holds you back versus motivates you and helps you come alive is determined by one thing and one thing only. Are you fighting it, or are you embracing it? If you're fighting it, or resisting it, or ignoring it, or there's so many different ways that people deal with fear. Like I said, 7.5 billion different ways. Like, for example, take ignoring fear. There's a lot of people that are ignoring fear right now during the coronavirus times. And as a result, they're ignoring the coronavirus and putting us all at risk. If you're ignoring fear, like let's say you have serious financial crisis on your hands right now because you didn't have a slush fund, you're paycheck to paycheck. You've been ignoring your fear around money for probably years. Thus, you've gotten into the situation where you are living paycheck to paycheck. And now you have to deal with your fear. You cannot keep ignoring it. And if you tap into your fear right now, then you're going to find some creative solutions, because you have to, because otherwise you're going to starve to death. Right now, during the coronavirus times, fear has never been more obvious, and people's relationship with fear has never been more obvious than it is right now.
Yeah.
And the people that have been ignoring fear can no longer ignore it. And they need to listen to it. And so what we can do, not only as artists, because at some point the coronavirus thing is going to pass and this podcast will live on. So just what we need to do is learn how to have an honest relationship with our fear and start to ask it questions. Like the practice I just outlined gets people more out of their heads and more into their bodies. Mm-hmm. You don't want to focus on the fear. Again, you want to feel it. It's very, very different. And when you're done with the 4 steps, can you then, this is kind of a bonus step, start to ask it questions. Like, why have you been trying to get my attention is a big one. That is like if somebody has an anxiety disorder. And usually fear will respond, I've been trying to get you to stop ignoring me, God damn it, right? And that's why I've had to scream so loud. So you can also pay attention to it like, okay, maybe it's saying, hey, you need to go see a doctor about that one thing. Oh, hey, fear may advise you, you need to have that difficult conversation with your spouse. You can't keep putting this off. Like in relationships, people that are having an ongoing argument over and over and over again, what is that? That's because they're not dealing with something that they're afraid of and they're projecting it on their partner. Mm-hmm. So if you actually continue to ignore your fear, then you never actually get to resolve the problem. If you try to rush to love as fast as possible, you're just kind of spiritually bypassing the issue and it never gets resolved and you have the same ongoing argument for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, right? Yeah. Can you actually just stop and say to your partner what you're afraid of? And then they say what they're afraid of and you say what you're, I mean, there's so many different examples I could give you right now that tapping into your fear, like I actually say that your relationship with fear is the most important relationship of your life. Because if it's a compromised relationship, any problem in your life, and it doesn't matter if it's spiritual, emotional, creative issues, procrastination, emotional issues, even if it's physical issues, your resistance or repression of emotions, in particular fear, either have something or everything to do with it. I agree. Conversely, if you learn how to make friends with your fear and tap into the wisdom of your fear, these issues resolve. Mm-hmm. An argument that you've been having with your spouse for 20 years resolves if you can sit with the fear and be honest with it and ask it questions.
Yeah, I love that. I love the asking it questions and listening for the answers. As an energy practitioner, I love the fact that all emotions are there for us to feel and embrace and not dictate you're good, you're bad, but like you said earlier, so you can live a full, rich life, feeling everything. And I think so easily fear is the one that gets beaten up the most. And so I love this thought. And for the last couple of weeks, I've really, as I've been reading your book and listening to your interviews, just the whole notion of embracing fear, like something comes alive in me as I think about it. but because of the potential of that, and then as I sit and I feel that and work through it. I have a long ways to go. I know for sure I have a long ways to go, but I love it. And I'm so grateful for you in giving this message out, because I think it's powerful. And I think right now, um, it's even more necessary than ever before. So if somebody wanted to work with you or find out more about this, how would they get a hold of you?
Go to my website, KristenUlmer.com. I have a free fear and anxiety assessment right there on the homepage. Take it. It starts you down the process of figuring out what your relationship is with fear, that you probably have no awareness of. You may think that it's one thing, but it may be another thing entirely. And what category this test puts you in will give you a tremendous amount of information on what to do instead that you've never considered before. So free fear and anxiety assessment, great place to start. My book, The Art of Fear, is the Bible on what to do about fear.
Awesome.
Get it, read it, you know. And I'm obsessed with this. This is like my ski career. It was amazing. I was super famous. I made a lot of money. Like,
Yeah.
Like it was incredible to be that good at something so difficult and dangerous for so long. To be the best in the world at something for 1 year, never mind 12 years, was wild.
I
But
remember watching you over and over again, just thinking, this woman is incredible. Yeah.
But I will say that I realize now that the only reason why I went through that is to put these pieces of the puzzle together. Like I have a really unique background that just like, I just had ahas popping up like popcorn the second I retired, including probably the biggest one, which is that changed everything for me, which is that awful feeling we associate with fear actually isn't fear. It's our resistance to feeling it. It's our, I don't want to feel this, that feels so bad. And that when you actually get rid of the resistance, only the aliveness remains. It's like all of these pieces of the puzzle I've put together, and I would not have been able to do it had it not been for my ski career. And so now I'm just of service. Like my ski career was all about hedonism and the gratification of my massive ego. But now I'm just completely of service, giving back to the world, offering what I've learned. This is very new. This is very different. It's counterintuitive, but it works. I have seen people with a 30-year anxiety disorder have it resolved in a week. So reach out to me, take the free fear and anxiety assessment. Let's talk some more.
Awesome. I love it. Thanks so much for your willingness to be a part of this and for talking to me today. You are blessing the world for sure. And I am very grateful for your time. And thank you for joining us, and have a wonderful day. Bye.
Thank you. You too. Good luck out there.
Thank you. You too. Wish you the very best.